everyone, welcome to my channel, and if you saw my introduction, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to kind of get into the birth story of Bryson and that whole thing. It's quite an interesting story and a long one, so I'm gonna just get right into it. So it all started probably in my third trimester. I started to get high blood pressure, and the baseline of my blood pressure just kept kind of creeping as I got further along. My doctor's office, they always check your urine, check your blood pressure, your weight, and everything like that, and your iron at each appointment. So one day I was actually doing my belly cast with my fiance, and I was standing for a long period of time. I started to notice that my hands were starting to tingle and my legs were starting to tingle, and they were getting super swollen, which they weren't beforehand, but they started to really blow up. And I never got swollen in my hands. It was always my legs and my feet. And my legs and my feet were hurting really bad, and it was just super uncomfortable. My legs and my hands actually started to turn purple, which was not normal to me. So I thought, I should really go to the hospital. So I ended up going to the hospital and being triaged, and they actually ended up sending me home and saying that nothing was wrong. I didn't see a doctor there. I saw a resident. Not that that has anything to do with them sending me home or anything, but they just kind of didn't really do anything about it or send me home with any medications or anything like that. A week later, I had a doctor's appointment. At that point, I was 35 weeks pregnant for that doctor's appointment. I had told them about how I had went to the hospital because this had happened and whatnot. They ask you every time if you had a hospital visit or anything like that. So I had told them about that. They had taken my blood pressure, done my urine and everything. And when the doctor had came in to talk to me, I had told her about all these symptoms that I was having, and she was kind of like, okay, let's run some additional testing. They had saw that my hemoglobin was low. They had seen just different things that were going on that they didn't notice before. So they ended up sending me home with a 24-hour urine test, and my doctor's appointment was on Friday, so they wanted me to bring it on Monday, which means I would do the urine test on Sunday. They wanted me to come back in on Monday with the urine and also to do additional testing to see if they had missed something that they didn't catch on to, I guess. I don't know. So we ended up doing, I did the urine test on Sunday. I had to fill up, every pee that I took, I had to put it in the jug. So I did that, and we brought it in on Monday. It was Monday afternoon because I went to work that day, had my work baby shower and everything, and then I had went to the doctor. So at that point, I hadn't been really swollen that day because I had been walking around and not at my desk all day. So I was actually pretty normal as far as my swelling went until I got until I got to the doctor's office. So once I got to the doctor's office, I had went back, they did my urine, and then they actually drew blood from me. Before they drew blood, they did my blood pressure, and I actually really was not feeling good. I was nauseated, I had a headache, I was just not feeling good. They took my blood pressure, they didn't say anything to me about it or anything, so I was just like, okay, my blood pressure's probably like it's always been. And they then drew my blood, and I had told her, I'm not feeling very well, not because she was drawing my blood, because I don't have problems with needles, I don't have problems with blood, I'm completely fine with both of those things. So she had finished, and then they sent me back out to the waiting room so they could get a room ready for me, and then I could see the doctor. So I had went back into the room. They had finally brought me back, and they had said, okay, so your blood pressure was really high and you're not feeling good. We are going to send you over to the hospital, which is literally at like a 5-minute walk from where I was at. So like a 2-minute drive is literally right next door. So they had sent me over there to be monitored and told me not to go anywhere like in between like the doctor's appointment and the hospital. So we had went over there. They actually sent me with my blood that they had just drawn, the tubes of blood. They had sent me with my urine, and they had sent me with some paperwork and stuff like that. So they sent me over. I ended up being triaged, and they were monitoring my blood pressure for about 2 or 3 hours before they decided that my blood pressure was not doing anything. At that point, it was very high still, and they had admitted me to antepartum, which I'm really terrible at explaining what antepartum is, but it's kind of where they would send you if you, like, if you're going into labor, or if you went into labor but they had to stop your labor because you're like really early, so then you have to spend all that time in the hospital, stuff, just certain circumstances like that. So to monitor me overnight, they wanted me to stay in antepartum. I had my mom, my fiance, and me, and they actually could not use the blood that I had been sent over there with. They had to throw it away. So they had to draw new blood because they were in the wrong tubes. So that was exciting. But my potassium actually ended up being low when they had did my blood. When they drew my blood, so I had to be hooked up to the potassium, and I was hooked up to the IV as well. So that was not fun. Let me tell you, the potassium hurt so bad. I was screaming, and it just was not fun. They had to run the IV fluids with the potassium so that it didn't burn. But let me tell you, when the IV fluid ran out and the potassium was just running, I could not handle it. It hurt so bad. So the next morning, my blood pressure was still pretty high. They sent in the doctor that was on call for my OB, and she actually came in and said, okay, your body's done. We're done. We're probably going to be inducing you, and we want a growth scan as well. So it was probably like 9:30, 10 o'clock by then, and they had set me down for the growth scan to see if the blood pressure was affecting his growth, and it wasn't, thank God. While I was down there, I did not feel good at all. A doctor had came in and spoke to me and could tell that I just was really feeling terrible at that point, and he's like, you really look like you have preeclampsia. And that's when it kind of set in for me that this was not really going the way that I wanted it to go, but that I was probably going to be induced for preeclampsia. So they had sent me back up to my room. The nurse had came in and said, I don't know if they told you already, but you're going to be induced today. And that's when it was kind of like set in stone. I was like, wow, I'm about to have my baby today or tomorrow, because they had to induce me, obviously. They sent me to the labor and delivery room. That's when I met the first nurse that was taking care of me until 7 p.m. that night. And she was the sweetest nurse in the whole entire world. She was so amazing. They had to hook me up to magnesium sulfate, which restricted me from getting out of bed, because it does make you feel very like flu-like and nasty. So they had hooked me up to that. They had to hook me up to leg massagers, so that my legs would not clot, the blood wouldn't clot. And I also was hooked up to the potassium and the IV, and I was hooked up to everything under the sun at that point. They checked me to see if I was dilated at all, and I was not dilated, not even a centimeter, by the time that they were going to stick the first pill in. Once they put the first pill in, I had actually, within the next probably 3 or 4 hours, I had dilated to a 2, which they didn't even think I was going to be dilated at all, because usually it takes a little longer. At that point, I was just kind of chilling, breathing through each contraction, because they weren't super bad. They more felt like period cramps at that point, and I had terrible period cramps prior to my pregnancy. So thank God for those, because those prepared me for the minimal part of the labor. And they put the second pill in me when they checked me that time. So I ended up being probably like 3 centimeters by that point or something, and they had put the next pill in, and that's when I was like, okay, so this is starting. And she had offered me IV pain medications, which I took, and then they had broke my water with like a little hook, I guess. They had to stick it in and break it, and that was so disgusting. The fluid leaking out of me felt so disgusting, but it wasn't too bad. It was okay. It just felt really weird, like they were hooking something inside of me. Ugh. So they broke my water, and at that point, almost like instantly, I had started to feel back contractions, and those were painful. Those were pretty painful. I mean, they weren't painful to the point where I was screaming or like I couldn't handle it or anything. They were just to the point where they were just hurting and they were uncomfortable. She was like, "You're handling this really well. I feel like you would be fine if you didn't get an epidural." But I was not having that. That was not happening. I needed the epidural because I cannot imagine the pain of him actually coming out of me. That was what the part that was scary to me. So she had said, okay, I'm going to get like somebody to come and have you sign the authorization for the epidural and the waiver or whatever. And so I did sign that, and I ended up getting the epidural like probably like 15 minutes later. That didn't hurt one bit. The dude that did my epidural, he was so sweet and so nice and so good at what he does. Like, you could paralyze somebody, and at that point I wasn't even worried about being paralyzed. I was just worrying about getting the epidural so I wasn't in pain, and so that I had it in time for the birth. So I had it, and after that I actually ended up passing out. All of us did. It was my mom, my sister, and my fiance. We all ended up falling asleep. And by the time I woke up, I had started to feel like I really had to poop. And I had felt that pressure by my bottom, and I just did not know what to do or how to handle it because I had felt like I needed to push, but I didn't know if that was what I was supposed to be doing. And I asked the nurse, I was like, I feel like I have to poop. Like, I really don't, like, I don't know if I should be like holding it or like what I should be doing. And she was like, just relax and let them kind of work their, work all the way through. So I was like, okay. So I could only handle that for probably like 10 or 15 more minutes. And that was when she was like, okay, let me check you. And I was 10 centimeters at that point. I was 10 centimeters dilated. And she was like, okay, we're going to practice pushing. And then once you get to a certain point, we'll have everyone come in so that you can be ready to deliver the baby. So I had pushed for probably 35 minutes until she was like, okay, he's like crowning, we need to get people in here. And she called everybody in. NICU nurses came in, a bunch of other nurses, the surgeon or whoever he was that was delivering the baby. It wasn't even a doctor of mine, so I don't know how all that worked. And then, obviously the people who are already in the room. So at that point, I was just pushing and pushing and pushing. They were like, do you want a mirror? I was like, yes, I want a mirror. So I watched him kind of coming out. Once he had gotten to a good point, my band would not stretch any further. They actually tried to lube it up. They tried a lot of different things to try and get his head out while I was pushing, but that didn't work. So they actually had to snip me internally a little bit, which wasn't too bad. They didn't have to like snip me all the way down or anything like that. Nothing crazy. At that point, his head had came out when I had pushed the next time after they had snipped me, and then they actually just ended up like pulling him out, and his shoulders popped out and like everything. And at that point I wasn't really worried about what they were doing. I was like, oh my god, my son, like, he was put on my chest, and then they had to take him over. He had swallowed some amniotic fluid, and they had to like get it out and everything and make him pretty, clean him, weigh him, whatever. And I was just like, are you almost done? Like, are you almost done? And I was like so excited to like for them to bring him back. At that point, they were just pushing all the blood out of I know this is so TMI, but it's raw, it's real. they were pushing the blood out of my stomach and everything was just coming out, and I didn't even have to push for the placenta. They just kind of pushed that out as well, which was really weird, and they had to stitch me up and everything. And my sister and my fiance watched the whole thing, and my fiance still loves me, so that's amazing in itself, because that sounds so disgusting. The stomach pushing did kind of hurt, but other than that, it wasn't really that bad. I was just more worried about him coming back so I could hold him. I was like so excited for that. So they weighed him. He was 6 pounds 13 ounces, born at 5:55. I only pushed from 5 a.m. to 5:55 a.m. So 55 minutes of pushing and my son was out, and they were so amazed by that, because every push that I had was so productive and just was like magic. The nurse was so sweet. She had, she was just so amazing coaching me through it. The guy that was delivering my son, he was amazing. He's the one that stitched me up. He was just so awesome and nice, and everybody was just so amazing. It was just such an awesome experience. I would do it all over again for my son a million times. That was kind of the birth part of this story, and then they had taken us to our room, and we actually ended up not getting discharged from the hospital until that Sunday. I did not want to be there that long, but my blood pressure was in need of being stabilized, and also they wanted to make sure I didn't, it didn't relapse or whatever. And my son actually ended up developing jaundice due to he was early, so that was to be kind of expected, him to have the jaundice. And he also wasn't eating very well because he was so lethargic and tired all the time because of his age, and also because of all the medications that I was on during the labor. So that kind of took a toll on him as well. So he ended up developing the jaundice, and we went home that Sunday, had to make an appointment for him to check his bilirubin the next day, and we ended up getting admitted back to the hospital for him to stay in the NICU for his jaundice, which was unexpected, and I was very upset and could not handle myself at that point. I knew I needed to be strong for my son, but I just was so done with being in the hospital, and I felt like I had failed him as a mom. So I was crying like every single day in the hospital. The NICU room was like a jail cell. It was terrible. It was not somewhere where you want to be, and you have to share a bathroom with like 3 other rooms. It just was not fun. He ended up having to be on IV fluids because he was dehydrated, and also be under the lights until Wednesday morning. So we had gotten there Monday morning, and on Wednesday morning he was taken off the light because his level was pretty stable. They wanted to see if it would rebound and if his level would go back up, and it didn't. So we were sent home that day, and we have not been back since, thank God, because I could not go back. I was a mess, and there was other stuff that had happened in the hospital as well with family and whatnot. So it was just not really an ideal situation. Usually people go home like the next day that they give birth. They said you don't have to be in there like more than a certain amount of time. You can go home like before, as long as your doctor discharges you and the baby is discharged, the pediatrician discharges them, then they can go home. I could have gone home so much sooner if it wasn't for the jaundice and the blood pressure and everything, but I'm glad everything just went the way it went because he needed the help, and so did I. My body did. So that's kind of the birth story. I can get more into the postpartum and whatnot, the breastfeeding and all of that in another video, because that is a whole video in itself, and this one is already super duper long, so I don't want to drag it on for too much longer. He is my world. I'm so happy that he is a part of my life now. I can't stress that enough. Postpartum has been a little tough, and I will get into that in another video, and I also will introduce him in the next video as well. this video is just getting too long. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening to this whole entire story. If you stayed all the way to the end, thank you. Like this video, give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe, and I will see you guys in another video.